Hi guys, this is Hero. How's everyone doing today? So today I'm going over Jupiter's transit in the sign of Gemini. Okay. Now this transit occurs from May 14th around to mid-November of this year. Okay, so about 6 months. There's a few variables that strongly impact this transit. Okay, the first one is going to be Saturn's placement in Pisces, and that Saturn also directly aspects Sagittarius. So both of those two are Jupiter's signs. So that's going to impact Jupiter. The second thing is that Rahu's in Aquarius, mutually aspecting this Gemini. And the third factor, which is by far the least important, is Mars throws a seventh and eighth aspect on Pisces for most of this transit. Okay, so I'll discuss all these one by one, but first let's just get started and lay the foundation. So how does Jupiter just act in Gemini, like independent of all this stuff? Okay, Gemini is one of Jupiter's opposite signs, right? Why? Because Jupiter owns Sagittarius and Gemini is the opposite of Sagittarius. Usually, whenever a planet is in its opposite sign, it is not the best energetic situation usually. Why? Because usually signs opposite from each other are like contrasting energies, right? So for example, Sagittarius is all about learning. Gemini is all about putting in self-efforts. Now, they need each other, which is why whenever planets are in any sign, they always aspect opposite of it. Like for example, your learning affects your self-efforts and your self-efforts affects your learning. But the focus is, yes, whenever a planet is in one, it always aspects the other, but the focus is still on one of the two, okay? So Jupiter here is the consciousness, right? Now, your Gemini is your self-efforts. So Jupiter, for example, loves to be in Sagittarius, right? Because your consciousness is in a very like learning environment, right? It can really learn and expand and grow and bloom in a way that is going to elevate it the most spiritually, which is great. However, in Gemini is about self-efforts. Your consciousness does not want to put in self-efforts, right? This is very material goal almost, right? Like, have you ever tried so hard to just make something happen in your life and you really felt like you were, like it just wasn't meant to be, or you were kind of just like fighting destiny or something like that, right? This is almost kind of how you can interpret this situation in a nutshell, right? Your consciousness does not want to put in self-efforts. Your consciousness loves to just go with the flow of life almost, okay? It definitely doesn't like it to attach to stuff or any material goals or dreams or ambitions you have. It does not really give two shits about making that come true, right? So when the consciousness has to focus on that, it is not, like I said, the most ideal spot. It's almost kind of like in a contrasting energetic spot. Okay, so you could kind of just feel, so now how does this affect us, like, you know, the average Joe on the street? You could kind of just feel like, in general, be without all these other factors, let's just pretend Jupiter's just in Gemini and how that'll generally play out. You could feel like your consciousness, which how conscious of it you are or not, that's up to you, but your inner consciousness or spiritual awareness, you just feel like you are like dragging along when it comes to the things that you want to make happen. Okay, you can kind of just look at that as a sense. It's kind of really hard to explain, but you can kind of just get that picture of, like, you know, you're just kind of forcing stuff for almost no reason, and it's taking a lot of effort, and things are not just, you're kind of just off the flow of life, regardless of the results of how things are playing out, right? Because literally you are putting in a self-effort in an energetic environment that does not really want excess efforts put into it, okay? So you have this consciousness who's putting in efforts. Now let's start building up layer by layer. So you have this Shani who's in Pisces aspecting Sagittarius, right? The first thing you have to understand is here's the thing. What does Saturn's 10th aspect represent, right? We know the 10th house, right? Not the 10th house from the ascendant, but just any 10th house in general represents purpose, Okay, so for example, the 10th house from the ascendant represents your purpose, which is often associated with things like career and things like that. But for example, the 10th house from the 7th, which is your relationships. So what's the purpose of your relationships? That would be the 4th house, which is all about, your comforts and, being nurtured and things like that, right? So moving forward, I'm going to assume you already know that. So when Shani is in Pisces, right, the purpose of detachment is so that you can learn. Have you ever heard the term, an old dog can't learn new tricks or something like that? You have to sometimes almost completely swipe away your old mindset to learn something new, right? So this is why Shani's in Pisces. So how this impacts here is that Jupiter, as you're applying that conscious energy into your self-efforts, the Shani's almost forcing you to detach from things along the way. And you might be asking things like, oh, what are you trying to exactly put in these, you said your consciousness is putting in these efforts. What exactly are you putting these efforts into? I'm going to get to that in a second, but it has to do with basically Mercury's transit. But moving forward, before I get into all this little detail about what you're exactly going to be putting an effort in. So your Shani is going to really force you to detach along the way. Okay. I think we can just conclude that little sub point for right now. The next thing, you have Rahu in Aquarius, right? So whenever Rahu, Jupiter, or Rahu and Ketu aspect each other, it's because, those three planets always aspect 5 and 9 from each other, okay? They always aspect the same type of sign. So like if it's in a water sign, it's going to aspect all the other water signs. If it's in a fire, air, earth, it's going to aspect. So in this situation, they're both in air signs, right? Rahu and Jupiter are in air signs, right? Air signs are all about expansion, okay? So for example, Gemini is all about expansion of your efforts, right? Libra is all about expansion of your relationships, right? And for example, Jupiter, when it's in Gemini, how you put yourself out there, how you put efforts is always going to impact your relationships, right? And that's going to impact what you ultimately karmically do in life, which is where Rahu sits in Aquarius. Okay, that's what Aquarius represents in a nutshell. So this Rahu, how's it going to impact in Aquarius this Jupiter and Gemini, right? So they kind of feed off of each other, but the Rahu in Aquarius, it's going to kind of make it seem to the Jupiter like, hey, the efforts that you're putting in, try to do X, Y, and Z to get these certain Rahu agenda results. Okay, so it's basically going to try to trick Jupiter into doing things for like a grand like result. Okay, so and then your Shani on the other hand is going to make you detach. So this is where you have to add everything together. Okay, it's not just this blind little what's good, what's bad. Okay, your Shani is going to make you detach. You're already going to feel detached, and your Rahu is going to make you super focused on this high agenda. Okay, so you need to be very, very, very cognizant of these two, because it's not like, oh, Shani's making me detached, but Rahu's making me attached, so they must cancel each other out. Absolutely not. Your Shani's making you just detaching in general, okay? And Rahu's making you attached to very certain things. So this actually could make you even more attached to this because you feel so detached from everything else. Okay, so you see how you can't just willy-nilly, make all these assumptions, okay? So what we need to do is we need to just monitor any high high goals that just suddenly have strong importance to us. Okay, and we need to monitor that this is just Rahu doing Rahu. Okay, now I'm not saying Rahu cannot give you great things. Okay, it can make you rich, it can do a lot of stuff. I've seen it, but we need to understand that a lot of the times it's just going to trick you with no result, a very temporary result, or a little result, or something along those lines. Okay, so just don't use your consciousness to get caught up in some grand result. And if you do, if it's something just like super passionate, whatever, just be very mindful about what superficial result you're going to get from it, right? Because we all like to do the right thing for the wrong reasons sometimes, okay? And we might not even recognize we're doing it for the wrong reasons, but you need to be very wary of this. Yeah, doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. That's another thing, okay? Now, another thing. So I said monitor your superficial results, okay? Now, your Jupiter, yes, it's in Gemini. It's its opposite sign, but you can also use this to your advantage. Jupiter's in Gemini in an aspect Sagittarius because at the end of the day, it has a slight goal of, or has actually a pretty big goal of putting itself out there to learn things, okay? So you're gonna wanna do just that. And Shani is also trying to achieve the same result. That's why it's in Pisces, throwing a 10th aspect on Sagittarius. Okay, that's like its main, you can almost say that's also Shani's main goal here. So it's really trying to help out this Jupiter. Okay, so it's trying to make it, so try to detach from all like your grand ideals of, because see, social media and all this kind of stuff, it's got us in such a gassed up state that we deserve the most for an extremely little amount of effort. Okay, think about like gambling, right? Like I deserve to win, right? And this mindset can, carry over into many different aspects of our life. Okay, I deserve this person because I did this extremely minimal, effort, right? I took them out to eat. I went over to their house, whatever, right? We think we deserve all this stuff for when in reality we probably might not. Okay, but we just need to be cognizant of that here, right? That don't think that you deserve the world just for a little bit of effort that you forcefully put out. Okay, make sure that you stay detached. Okay, that's going to be your best friend here, and just always constantly put yourself in a learning mindset. Okay, anything you do, try to grasp, what am I going to learn from this if I do this? Okay, and what is the result that I'm anticipating? And if I'm anticipating some extremely high material result, you need to be honest with yourself here, then you probably shouldn't do it. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna talk about the Mars thing, but it's already a little bit a lot going on here, so I'm gonna probably push it to the side. But your Mars, okay, just to talk about it for a couple more seconds. Actually, no, there's something more important I need to talk about. That is what I promised to talk about a few minutes ago, which is what am I exactly putting the focus on, right? So we said that Jupiter is in Gemini. The consciousness is putting out self-efforts, right? Okay, these self-efforts are changing, right? And that's because who owns Gemini? It's Mercury. And Mercury changes signs a lot. See, the thing you have to understand is that this is not done by coincidence. That, Jupiter just happens to be in a Gemini, and Gemini, the sign ruler just, changes all the time. No. All the earlier signs, so like, maybe besides the exception of, okay, let's just say from 2 to 7, okay? They're all ruled by quick moving planets, okay? And these are all more primal in nature. I've gone over this before in my all signs video, okay? But versus the second half, they are more conventionally spiritual signs or karmic signs, and the ruler of those planets move very slowly, right? That's because the earlier signs that are more primal in nature, things happen quick. Okay, this is why, just a side tangent, your more primal, superficial relationships, they come and go quick, right? Versus your more lengthier, karmic, spiritual relationships, they tend to be a little bit more long lasting. You can apply this for anything in your life, for the most part, your career, your friends, whatever, right? Your family, for example, your family's with you your whole life, and that's probably the most karmic thing in your whole life, okay? So yeah, Jupiter's in a very primal sign, okay, which is why it doesn't do that well here, by the way. That's one of the reasons. But yeah, so it's here. So its focus is kind of moving super, super quick. Okay, it's not really able to really hunker down on one specific area. Okay, so to monitor your focus, you're gonna basically have to look at where Mercury is. When Mercury is with Jupiter itself, it'll probably do the best in general, okay? But for the rest of the time, it'll do overall somewhat average. I'd probably say in general, it will probably do the worst in Cancer, especially if it goes retrograde, and I'll probably say second to last place would be like Taurus, okay? And then Aries and Leo would do like okay. But yeah, so to understand the focus of where your Jupiter is trying to put that out, you're gonna have to look at your Mercury, right? This is where the whole kind of picture comes together. I literally talked about half the planets here. And even though I'm already at 17 minutes, why not? The Mars here, so your Mars, it's gonna go through Leo and Virgo. That's I think the only two full signs Mars goes through in this transit, right? And when Mars is in Leo, it throws an 8th aspect on Pisces. And when Mars is in Virgo, it throws a 7th aspect on Pisces, okay? Now, the 8th aspect is more of an intuitive aspect. The 7th aspect is more of a complementary aspect, right? So when Mars is in Leo, it's focusing on its fulfillment, but it's being very intuitive about what it needs to detach from, right? Because in order to really achieve something, you need to know what to detach from. And then when Mars is in Virgo, very calculative, you also need to have a very detached mindset also, right? But these are just aspects. It's not like Mars is actually in Pisces itself. So the energy is not that strong, but just from a standpoint, without adding over confusion on this relatively more minor effect, when it comes to that like inner Mars energy of actually taking action and things like that, you could recognize a little bit of detachment awareness in the background. I'll just leave it at that, because Mars is probably the most difficult planet to explain in general, okay? But in general, just to wrap up this video, Jupiter's in Gemini. You could feel, your consciousness is being, I'm not gonna say exploited, but kind of being forced to put in an area that's maybe not spiritually conventional, but some sort of efforts that's gonna fulfill your self needs. Your Saturn is gonna try to get you to detach a lot. So I'd strongly encourage you to detach as much as possible because it's trying to fulfill that ultimate goal of that Sagittarius. Your Rahu is kind of going to try to trick you. So you'd really be mindful of anything you do, some grand result that you can get from it. And just keep an eye on where Mercury is throughout this whole time, right? The area in which your consciousness is going to want to put those self-efforts revolves, pretty much where Mercury is, right? And you can take most advantage of this transit when Mercury's in Gemini, right? And when it's in Cancer, especially when it's retrograde, just be a little extra careful, okay? All right, I'm officially almost at 20 minutes. That's it for this video. If you have any questions or comments, as usual, feel free to let me know. And until next time, I'll talk to everyone later. Thank you all very, very much for watching.